This is chapter 11, and in chapter 11 we have started our second module, and our second module has to do with organization, organizational structures and design. And organizing, if you recall from chapter 1, is the second stage or the second step of our management process. We have discussed already planning, the importance of planning. Remember that planning is all about identifying goals and objectives and determining how best to achieve those goals. And we also discussed when we looked at planning that once we have identified what we want to do and how we want to do it, the next step is organization. How best can we create structures that allow us to fulfill our plan? And that's what we're going to look at chapter 11 and chapter 12. Creating structures and designs that will help us in order to achieve our goals and fulfill our plans. So we can start by just simply defining, as we did for planning, what organizing is. And it says here that it arranges people and resources to work together to accomplish a goal. That is essentially creating a structure. In a plan, we identify what needs to be done. The action steps, remember, that have to be achieved in order for our objectives to be realized. Well, in organization, we are now getting the people, getting the resources that are required to achieve those steps. Once we get those, we have to then group them and coordinate their individual and separate functions in such a way that the entire plan is realized, and obviously our objectives are realized along with it. And a structure, therefore, is just simply a representation of that arrangement. It shows us the system of tasks, reporting relationships, and communication linkages. So if we use the example of, let's say, getting a party, our plan is to throw our friend a birthday party, and we know exactly when we want the birthday party to be, and we know what we want the birthday party to comprise. Well, our next step is, once we've identified what we want to do and, as I said, how we want to do it, planning, we have to get people to do it. So we might have, in our planning stages, decided we're going to have a DJ, we're going to have food, we're going to have decorations, we need invitations, we need a location. All of those are the steps, all of those are the requirements, the how, if you will, to throwing this birthday party. In our organization, we then allocate to each one of those processes, each one of those actions, people and perhaps resources, things like time and money, in order for us to be able to get those things accomplished and obviously realize our plan of this party, realize our objectives of throwing this party. And so we might say, this person, you're in charge of music, this person, you're in charge of food, this person, location, and then give those people the resources necessary to accomplish their specific tasks. But it's not just allocating resources to these individual parts. It's also arranging and coordinating their activity so that the whole thing comes together. So we want to make sure that the location that we're booking can utilize or is able to accommodate the DJ that somebody else is going to get, and that the food is going to be brought in at the right time to be coordinated with the drinks, perhaps. All of these different parts, what I'm trying to illustrate to you, all of these different parts of the party planning can be done separately, but they must be brought together in order to have the complete plan and the ultimate objective realized. Think about when you're in project teams or doing team assignments. Many times you get the assignment, and what you do as students, well, you start breaking it up into specific tasks. You start determining, okay, you can do this, I can do this, the other person can do that. What you're doing there is organization, but you still must find a way to bring all those separate individual tasks together so that you can complete and you can create that project that will then present it as a team effort. And that's what organization is. An organizational structure, as I said, is just a representation of that. It's a representation of that within a business organization. How does organization fit into the entire management process? Well, as we said, planning gives us the direction. It tells us where we need to go. Organizing helps us to create those structures, the vehicles, in order to realize that plan that we've created in the planning stage. It's the vehicle that we will use to get to our ultimate goal. And that vehicle, that structure, then will be inspired, as we'll see in the leading, and that inspiration will get us in the moving stage, the implementation stage, where we can then evaluate through controlling. So once we've planned, once we've said how we want to get there, we need some type of vehicle, some type of means in which to get there, and we do that through organizing. And an organization chart in an organization, in a business, is a diagram describing reporting relationships and the formal arrangement of work positions. So many times you've probably seen, and your text has examples of what we call an organization chart. You might see at the very top the CEO, beneath them the vice presidents, the head of divisions, and beneath them, and as you go down in the hierarchy, you might see the organizational chart becoming wider and wider. That chart simply tells us who does what in the organization, who reports to whom in the organization, how individual tasks and assignments and roles are connected and linked or grouped together, and then how those individual efforts, how those group efforts in the organization, the different part of the organizations, are then brought together. Okay, that's what an organizational chart is. It simply illustrates the reporting relationships, the roles in the organization, the grouping of roles, and then the coordination of those efforts. It is, in fact, a graphical illustration of the vehicle or the type of organizational vehicle that specific business enterprise or that specific firm has chosen in order to realize its plans. And it's really important that you see that connection between organization and planning, because in essence, because planning influences organizations and organizational techniques and tools, then the type of plan that you've chosen, the type of strategy that you chose, remember you used that term in chapter 10, the strategic plan, the long-term comprehensive plan, that type of plan will then heavily influence the type of structure that you will then choose for your organization, because your plan tells you what you want to achieve and how you want to achieve it. Your structure facilitates that movement. It facilitates that plan. So it is heavily influenced by that plan. Remember that that's going to become much more relevant and much more identifiable when we look at organizational design in the second brief lecture. But remember it for now, please. So the organizational chart is an illustration of the formal structure of the organization, the formal network, the formal organizational design, if you will. But within organizations, there's sometimes what we call informal structures. And it says here it's the set of unofficial relationships between organization members. Well, what does that mean? Well, perhaps in organizations you may have an issue, you may have an experience like this, where you want to communicate with another department. And if you look at the organizational chart, let's say you're the head of one department and you want to communicate, you want to work with the other department. The organizational chart might indicate to you that the way that you do that is through contacting the head of the other organizational department. Okay, you are at the same level, if you will, of the organizational structure, and so maybe the best way is to liaise between the heads. Well, that might not necessarily work, and one reason is because you might not be very friendly with that organizational head in that new department. You all might not get along so well, but you do get along with another member in that organizational department. And so you might get on, and the reason that you get along is that you are, let's say you might be neighbors, or you might eat lunch together, or you might, be part of a a firm baseball, company baseball team, something like that. You have this unofficial relationship. You're not tied together formally in the organizational network. You don't really work together, right? You're not at the same level. You're not on any committees together, but you have an informal relationship. And what you can do is utilize that informal relationship to communicate to that other department, to start working together, utilizing that already existing friendship or informal relationship. And so that's what an informal structure is. It is not represented, it's not demonstrated, you can't see it on an organizational structure chart, but it exists. It exists, and many times in parallel to the formal structure. Well, are there any advantages to an informal structure being created within an organization? As I said, the organization itself doesn't create it voluntarily. It kind of comes about because of people's social network ties and their friendships. Well, yes, it can, because it can help people to accomplish their work. I just showed you that. Because of the lack of relationship, formal relationship between two organizational departments, maybe they weren't tied together in the formal network, they can still work together if members of each department know and have relationships with each other informally. So we aren't necessarily, there's really no formal linkage between us, but because we have friendships, we can find ways to build and work together. I give you an example. In the Xavier University, the division of business doesn't necessarily have any formal ties with the psychology department. But there are some of us in the division of business, some professors, that have relationships, informal relationships and friendships with some of the professors in the psychology department. And through, just informal meetings and socialization, we come up with ideas of how psychology and the division of business and other departments perhaps can work together to create cross-functional classes, to do cross-functional research. All that comes about because of these informal ties. Another benefit of informal structures that it could sometimes overcome the limits of formal structures. As you will see again when we speak about organizational design, some formal structures can be very, very inefficient, very difficult to communicate across. And by using informal networks, informal relationships, you can overcome some of that inefficiency of bureaucracy. A third advantage, of informal structures is gaining access to interpersonal networks. Well, what that is that in the organization, many times people are trying to find ways to connect to others, to get resources, to be able to move and to be mobile in the structure. And by getting into interpersonal networks, having friendships, getting into social arenas with others, it can definitely help in terms of mentorship, in terms of getting the resources necessary, acquiring the information necessary. And then this informal learning through others, not necessarily through any formal training, but through the interactions that come from informal structures. But along with the advantages of the informal structures, there are distinct disadvantages. Okay? They actually may work against the best interests of the entire organization. That happens sometimes when informal structures become more important than formal structures. People start listening to their friends more than they listen to their bosses, and therefore it can undermine what the entire organization wants to do, because these groups or these cliques start kind of becoming a life, or having a life of their own. They don't work together in the organization for the organization's best interest. The susceptibility to rumor is huge. Again, because these informal structures don't always have the formal channels of communication, they don't always have the best information, they can easily start and spread rumors that can hurt the organization. Inaccurate information may be carried, as I just said, and may breed resistance to change. You're so connected, you're so tied to your informal structure that you don't want to change. You don't want to make movements. You start resisting when the organization starts bringing change up, and that can hurt the organization. Our next step is to look at what traditional organizational structures are like. And I want to bring you back to what I discussed, or what I talked about very early on in this lecture, in that there is a need to connect your plan with your type or choice of organizational structure, because your structure is what will help you to implement your plan or your strategy. So essentially, there can be many structures utilized in organizations and firms because there are many different types of strategies. If you remember, in chapter 10, we talked about some general types of strategies like focus, course leadership, differentiation, course leadership, focus, differentiation. These general, but they're all variations, or there can be variations of those general strategies. Well, if there are different strategies, there are likely to be different organizational structures. And here we will see some types of organizational structures. Regardless of the type of organizational structures, they are all based upon this premise of departmentalization. What is departmentalization? Well, you might have heard about this guy called Adam Smith, and Adam Smith was a very famous philosopher and economist, and his argument was that as you become larger in an organization, as the organizations expand, there is a need for what is called division of labor. You can't have one person doing every single thing in the organization. That is way too ineffective and way too inefficient. As organizations grow, you have to start dividing your labor force. You have to give them specific roles and allow them to concentrate on those roles. And you do that through this concept of departmentalization, whereas you group people with and jobs into work units or formal teams. So you break up tasks into individual roles, specific roles, and then you then group people with specific or certain roles together. Okay, you then group people with specific roles together. That's departmentalization. So the first is division of labor, identifying and allocating specific people to specific roles, and then grouping those people, those roles, together into some type of formal team or formal department. And these formal teams are then linked to create three major types. So essentially, the three major types of traditional structures are based upon the type of departmentalization you choose. Essentially, how you have chosen to group people or roles together. And because there are different ways to group people and roles together, there are different organizational structures. So they're all based on the premise of departmentalization, and they differ based on the how you departmentalize. How you departmentalize, the choice that you've made in grouping tasks or roles together. Okay? This is the first example of a traditional organizational structure. It's a functional structure, and it's really the most how would I say this? It is essentially the simplest form of organization, a functional structure. How do you departmentalize? How do you group people together? Well, you group people together with similar skills and performing similar tasks. That's how you group them. And as I said, this is the simplest and perhaps in the initial stages of a firm, the most common type of functional structure. You can compare it to, let's say, we're trying to organize our clothes. Okay, ladies, this might be more applicable to you, but some guys have a lot of clothes as well. But let's say we're trying to organize our closet, our clothes, and we decided to put all our socks together, to put all our shoes together, to put all our shirts together, to put all our trousers together. That would essentially be a functional structure arrangement or organization. People, or in that example, the clothes or the items that are similar, that do similar things, that look similar, are all put together. In organizations, we often do that. We put people that do similar things together, okay? They work in the same functional areas. So how does that illustrate or represent itself in an organization? Well, you hear terms like the accounting department or the marketing department or the finance department. Everyone in that organization, they're doing different things, just like your socks may be different colors and you may have different shirts, but they're all similar. They all do similar things, okay? So that's the way we do it in a functional structure. And for example, in a division of business, one can argue that that is a representation of a functional structure. In the division of business, I teach management. There are others that teach accounting. Others teach economics, okay? They're all different, but we're similar in terms of our function, in terms of we all teach something related to business. They all teach something that's related. And it says here, I want you to pay special attention to this. That works well for a small organization producing few products or services. And I want to ask you this question. Why do you think that is? Functional structures, as I said, is the simplest form of organizational structuring, and it was the most common form, especially when businesses, the concept of an organization was new. Well, the reason this works well for small organization producing few products is because of the way, again, we're grouping things. We're grouping things based upon the similarity of roles rather than the similarity of product or the similarity of market, as you'll see in a little bit. And so everybody that's working in this department are all working or are all together simply because their functions are similar. Okay? Now, if we start introducing, let's say, for example, we start introducing new products. So I'm just going to choose an accounting department. Okay? And everyone in this accounting department, they do different things. They do account receivables, they do account payables. Some of them do payroll, perhaps. They're all in this department together, and we're all working on one product. What if we start introducing multiple products? Now, is the accounting for automobile the same thing as the accounting for bread or the accounting for an airplane? It probably isn't. Or let's look at it from a marketing perspective. Let's say we're all working in the marketing department and our initial product is an automobile, and then we've introduced a restaurant, and then we've introduced computers. Well, the marketing for each one of those products might be different. And so, in essence, once we start introducing that variety, we might require different types of marketing skills, and therefore the functional arrangement may not be too suitable for that type of organization. Because we're becoming more complex, just grouping people based upon their functional areas may not be suitable. Okay, so as the organization expands, as we start getting variety, as we start having different or differing requirements, even in our functional areas, we can't account for cars the same way we account for airplanes. We can't market automobiles the same way we market computers. Then just simply grouping people together because they all have some marketing link may not be effective. And that's where we will try, or we will start seeing the need for different types of structures. But suffice at this stage, when we have just one product or very few products, right, we can all just concentrate on that. Then functional arrangement is suitable. And that's an example, an illustration of what a functional structure will look at. At the very top, you have the president, then you have the vice president, all of their marketing, right? All of their different functional areas. You have marketing, finance, production, human resources. Below them, you have, for a branch, you have a branch manager. You have loans. All of these are functional areas. All of these are functional areas right here. And that's how the organization is broken up. It's departmentalized. Well, there's distinct advantages to a functional structure. One is that you get your economies of scale, and economies of scale come from volume production. Again, many times in a functional structure, you're producing one or very few products or services, so you can produce that in volume, and therefore you can benefit from that by just producing one or few products. The other benefit with respect to the departments is that when you're in accounting or when you're in marketing, when you're finance, that's all you're concentrating on. All that you're concentrating on. And the more that you do that, the better you get at it, the more efficient you become at it. And that's how, again, you produce economies of scale. You're just working accounting, you're just doing marketing, you're just doing finance. And so you become much more effective and efficient at it. That's one of the benefits that Adam Smith argued for division of labor. You benefit through the economies of scale. You get so good at it because that's all you concentrate on. The other advantage is you take your assignments, or task assignments I should say, are consistent with expertise and training. So everyone in this area, everyone in that functional area are trained and have the right expertise to be able to do that role effectively. And so because you've assigned them what they're good at, there is going to be consistency and therefore a better chance that they will do a good job. There's ability to have technical problem solving, again, because you have a group of experts all dedicated to that one area. You can train and you can have skill development. Again, because of your concentration in just one area, you can train specifically for that and you can develop skills specifically in that area. And then there's a clear career path within functions. You maybe start, let's say you're in the accounting department, you start on receivables, then you become the head of that area, head of receivables, then you might become the head of the accounting department. There's clear paths because you have centralized, or you have, I guess, created this department that is based or concentrated on that one area. So if you work in there, you have that path, that clear path of mobility in the structure. But there are significant disadvantages. As I said, this type of structure works best when the organization is very simple. And simple doesn't mean necessarily small all the time, although oftentimes it is correlated to the size. But simple has to do more with the variety, if you will, or the expansiveness of your product line or your service line or your markets. If you're serving one market, or if you're producing one product or service, then you're less likely to need anything beyond a functional structure. Again, it's simple. You know your customer, you know your market, and then you can just break your organization down into these concentrated tasks and responsibilities, and then just mobilize and coordinate those activities together to fulfill or to serve that market or to create that product. Once you start adding products, once you start adding markets, and there become significant variations in the functional areas, then you require some splitting, you require some alternative type of departmentalization, because that's essentially what you did. You created variety in the management function with the, you created variety in each one of the functional areas. When I used the example earlier of bringing in automobiles and airplanes, you created variety in those functional areas. So now it wasn't just a case of just one type of marketing. Well, marketing changed depending upon what product you were marketing. What if we use the example of getting into a new geographical market? So in a new geographical market, let's say we expand our business now into China. We expanded our business now into China, and so our production is perhaps different for the Chinese market than it is for the American market. So simply having one or a group of people do production for both might be too difficult and might not be practical. So we might have to break that production function up into different areas based upon where our production or what market our products are going to serve. And we're going to see that in a little bit. So again, when the organization is simple, when we're serving one market, we're making one product, right? Then functional structures tend to work. But the disadvantages arise especially as we attempt to expand and grow our organization. So what are some of these disadvantages? Well, the first one says the difficulty in pinpointing responsibilities. If you remember, we just said one of the great advantages of a functional structure is that it helps people in the organization to concentrate their efforts on just one area of expertise. That's great, but what happens when there are certain requirements that cover all expertise, like cost containment, product quality, innovation? That is necessary across the organization. But when you have people's efforts concentrated in just one functional area like accounting or marketing or production, no part of the organization, no department is going to be willing to take responsibility for things that the entire organization should be taking responsibility. So marketing will say, you know what, it's not really our responsibility to invest and make this quality. Okay, that's not really our job. Our job is to be marketers. Or production will say, you know, our role is not really to promote innovation. I don't know who does that, but what we do here is we ensure that we produce what's necessary. And so what happens is those characteristics, those demands that go across the entire organization kind of get lost because nobody wants to take responsibility. Everybody is doing their own thing and nobody is taking responsibility for these overlying objectives, if you will. What also can happen is what we call these functional chimneys or the functional myopia problem. Going back again, the benefit of the functional structure is that it segregates, it allows people to concentrate their efforts in just one area. But what can easily happen is that those people then start identifying with that area more than they identify with the entire organization. So when you ask someone, well, where do you work? Well, I work in the division of business. Yeah, okay. Or the division of business part of Xavier University. Yeah, it is, but I identify more with the division of business than I do with Xavier University. So I start saying things like, oh, well, you know, I don't know what they're doing over there in English, but in business, this is what we do. That's where you get these functional chimney problems. You start isolating yourself because, and that's understandable. You're working with these people, you're working in your area more so, and you're interacting with people there more so than you're interacting with other parts of the organization. So you can tend to be distracted and tend to become so committed to your area that you ignore the fact that you are related to other areas, and it becomes more of a competitive type relationship with the rest of the organization than a cooperative arrangement. And that's where you can have significant problems. And as you will see, functional structures can oftentimes create problems in terms of bureaucracy. So those are the disadvantages. So again, think about functional, simple. You break your department, you departmentalize, you group people based upon their functional expertise. Okay, they do similar tasks, and so you group them together. That makes sense. It's intuitively sensible, and it works in simple organizations. There are clear benefits to that. People can concentrate their efforts and therefore become much more efficient and effective, generating economies of scale, right? People can concentrate their efforts, and you can have great technical expertise, clear career paths, all of those things. But ironically, that concentration, that segregation can actually lead to problems with respect to cooperation and coordination across the entire organization. So while breaking it up is beneficial to allow us to concentrate our efforts, it can then hurt our ability to bring it all together, okay? An alternative to functional structures, and we talked about the need for this, especially as businesses expand, is a divisional structure. And what a divisional structure is whereas in a functional structure we were grouping or departmentalizing based upon the similarity across task or functional roles, in a divisional structure we are grouping people not necessarily because they do similar stuff, but because they work on similar stuff. They work on the same product or process. They serve similar customers and or are located in the same area or geographical region. So now you are grouped together not because you do similar tasks, but because you, one, work on similar products, two, you serve similar markets, or three, you serve similar customers. That is how you are now departmentalized. And it says here, it's common in complex organizations. So for example, you will hear an organization like Toyota, and Toyota might have what's called the Toyota Japan, and they might have Toyota America. What are those? Those are divisions of Toyota, and they were created based upon the geographical region that specific area of the organization is created to serve. Those are what we call divisions. So everybody that works in Toyota Japan works for or works on products and services geared towards the Japanese market. Similarly, everyone that works in Toyota America works on products and services geared towards the American and North American market. Now, within those divisions, you will have accountants and people in marketing and finance. In fact, a lot of times in divisions, it'll essentially be almost a sub-organization. Be a sub-organization because all the different functional areas. And so therefore, people that work in that division aren't necessarily similar based upon their functions. No, because as I said, you got people that are marketing, some people are finance, some people are production, right? So they have different functions. What brings them together? What identifies them? What links them together, if you will? It's the fact that they're serving the same market, they're serving the same customer, or they're working towards building or creating the same product or service. So that's what I want you to understand. So whenever firms start expanding in terms of getting different customers, expanding in terms of getting into different markets, or expanding in terms of creating different products or services, the functional structure, as we looked at, simply no longer works. And so you have to move, you have to gravitate towards a divisional structure, creating these sub-departments, these sub-areas of the organizations that are now focused on specific markets, specific customers, or specific products. Functional works when we only have one or few products, one or few markets, one or few customers. Whenever we start expanding that, we need to then look at grouping people, not just based upon what they do in terms of their functional similarity, but on what product they're working on, what market they're working for, and what customers they're trying to serve. And so this is an example of a divisional structure. Here you see the type. It's a divisional structure here based upon product, okay? And so the focus is the good or the service produced. So look at this right here. You have in this a divisional structure, grocery products, drugs, and toiletries. This is based on the products that they are creating. Whoever works in this division right here, they're all working towards creating, marketing, selling grocery products. Similarly here, whoever's working is working towards creating, marketing, selling drugs and toiletries. In these divisions, you will have people that are in accounting, as I said, finance, R&D, supply management. They're all working, they all have different functions, but they're all connected because they are all dedicated towards grocery products. Here, your type, your departmentalization, your division is not necessarily on product. You might be making the same product, but you're making it in different markets and for different markets. And as we saw when we talked about the global, the cultural issue might require or influence you to do things differently, to conduct business differently. And so because of that, you might want to create different divisions. So here you have an Asian division and a European division. Everyone in the Asian division is going to be working towards creating products and services, selling it to the Asian division. Everyone in the European is going to do likewise for the European market. So this is just some examples. You can break it down in terms of product, with geography, customer, or even process. The advantages of divisional, a lot of them overcome some of the limitations of functional. So you'll see more flexibility in responding to environmental changes. So now, because everyone is connected together, not because of their functional areas, but because of the products they create, the markets they serve, and the geographies in which they find themselves in, they can respond to whatever's happening in the environment more effectively because they're in touch with the environment more. They're in touch because they are serving specific customers, specific geographic locations, or creating specific products. They're interacting more so with the environment. They're looking outwards, whereas functional structures were seen to be more geared towards promoting efficiency, right? We wanted to get economies of scale. We wanted to be efficient. We wanted to concentrate our task and become really good at what we do. There was less concern for what was going on in the environment. We were just trying to be as efficient as possible within. And so when things happen, when things occurred in the environment, requiring us to change our product, requiring us to serve different markets, requiring us to get new customers, we were unwilling in a functional structure to do that because, again, remember, we were so focused on being the best at what we were doing right then, we forgot the fact that we were serving an external environment. Not so with the divisional structure. The divisional structure is much more open to the environment. We're focused on our customer, we're focused on our market, we're focused on our product type, and because of that, we will be more responsive to environmental changes. So think of it this way, whereas functional structures promoted efficiency, doing things more efficient, divisional structures promote flexibility. It promotes flexibility. Functional structures promote efficiency. Divisional structures promote flexibility. It helps us obviously to improve our coordination. You have less of a problem in terms of functional silos because now people are not working in just their functional areas, but they're working in teams across one product, across one market, or across one geography. And so you're more likely to see interaction between accounting and finance and R&D. Why? Because we're all working towards the same goal, whether that be a product, whether that be a market, whether that be a customer. You got clear points of responsibility now because you have broken the organization up into products, into markets, into customers. Everyone in that division now knows that they're responsible for the quality, the innovation, the cost, the general well-being of their division. So whereas in the functional arrangement, you didn't have any entity wanting to take responsibility, you have created essentially a self-contained entity now that must take responsibility. the expertise, whereas before they were focused just on the functional area, they're now focused on specific customers, specific products and regions, and that again helps in terms of being flexible and responding. So let's say something were happening in Asia with our example previously with the Asian division, European division, because that division is geared towards Asia. When things occur in Asia, they can much more readily, much more effectively change and adapt to meet those demands. So because now you're focused away outside of the organization into the environment, there is greater expertise in being able to fill the demands of the specific market or customers that you're serving. And it helps in terms of ease of restructuring, just changing and adapting the organization. Divisional structures that we said are much more flexible than functional structures. But they're not the be all end all, and they themselves, divisional structures, have disadvantages. And what are they? Well, one of the major disadvantages that divisional structures can create is this whole idea of duplication of resources and efforts across divisions. What do we mean by that? Well, as I just mentioned to you, in each division, or each division many times in organizations can be seen as a self-contained organization, or a mini organization, if you will, within the organization, the total of overall organization. So in most divisions, you will have all the different functional areas of a simple functional structure. You'll have your accounting, your marketing, your product and production. You have all of these parts, and each one of these divisions will have these parts. Well, what's likely to happen is what we're seeing here: duplication of resources and efforts. You have in one area someone doing accounting for that product, and then in this other area you have someone doing accounting for this product. Now, as we said, this might be necessary because the accounting is different or the marketing is different, but there might be some functional areas that can still be universally applied across all divisions. For example, something like human resources can be utilized in all divisions. And so if every division has its own human resources, what you're going to see there is a lot of duplication of effort. Okay, that one's doing exactly what the other one's doing, and that is waste. That is wasting your resources. You might have people, therefore, because you've broken it up into all these different areas, and it could really have been handled by one area. You will have many times in those types of situations people that aren't doing much. They aren't doing much because there really isn't that much to do. This was a job that could have been handled by one person. Now it's being handled by four, and that's inefficiency. That's waste in an organization, and that's one of the major disadvantages of a divisional structure. Again, remember, it promotes flexibility, but it can do that at the expense of efficiency. Functional structures promote efficiency, but it often does it at the expense of flexibility. So that's one of the problems with divisional structures. You've created these subunits and you've basically made them into sub-organizations. You have all of these different functional areas, and sometimes, as I said, that's necessary, but in some cases efforts are being duplicated, resources are being wasted, and you then have to perhaps go back or revert to some aspects of the functional structure. And then you have competition and poor coordination across divisions. Yes, while it is better at cooperation within the division, there might still be competition across divisions. So, in going back to our example, there might be competition between the Asian division and the European division. There is great cooperation within each division. Everybody in the Asian division works well together, fantastic. But across divisions, interdivisional, if you will, there can still be competition. And just like functional structures, people might identify more with their division than they do with the entire organization. So they may be more concerned with fulfilling their divisional requirements than they will for the entire organization. And that could lead again to problems and competition. So what do we have here? We have two different forms of departmentalization or different organizational structures. On one hand, you have the functional structure, which is simple and promotes efficiency. It's great for organizations that are making one product or service, that are serving one of few markets, and that are serving one of few customers. It works great, promotes efficiency, gives us that concentration and that technical expertise, all our economies of scale and all that. On the other hand, you have our divisional structure, which is better for more complex organizations that are expanding, creating different products and services, serving different customers, are involved in different markets, geographical markets, right? And it promotes flexibility. But whereas the functional structure promotes efficiency, it sacrifices flexibility. And whereas the divisional structure promotes flexibility, as we see, it sacrifices efficiency. So is there a way for us to have the best of both worlds? Is there a structure out there that can allow us to gain the efficiency of a functional structure while gaining the flexibility of a divisional structure? Is there a great compromise? And the answer to that is potentially there is. And that is created through this matrix structure. And essentially what we're doing in a matrix structure is that we're combining the functional and the divisional to try to gain the advantages of both and to help minimize or mitigate the disadvantages of both. So we're trying to get the best of both worlds, if you will. We're trying to get the benefit of efficiency that comes from the functional structure, and we're trying to get the benefit of the flexibility that comes from a divisional structure, and at the same time minimizing the inefficiency of divisional structures and minimizing the inflexibility of functional structures. And so this is what the matrix looks like. And if you see this little yellow guy, we're going to call him yellow guy, right? He's in a functional, or she's in a functional structure. How do we know that? Well, on the vertical axis here, you have the different divisions. Project A, Project B, Project C. Those are all divisions. And Project A could be geared towards a specific market, specific product, or a specific customer. Whatever. It's a division. And here we have a functional arrangement. So this yellow guy here, well, he works in the manufacturing functional area. That's the manufacturing department. He does something in manufacturing, and he is also part of, or he's in a manufacturing arena within this project, within this division. So he's a member of this functional area, and also he's a member of this division. Okay, well, what's the advantages of that? Well, the argument is one. It is better cooperation across functions. Well, why does that happen? Well, that happens because there is that divisional element built into a matrix structure, okay? So although that person was working in manufacturing, they were also working in the Project A team, and therefore they would have to interact with other members, other functional people that were working on Project A. They would have to interact there, so there's better cooperation. It also says there's improved decision making because you're considering not just the divisional goals, but you're also considering the functional goals at the same time. You get the flexibility, obviously, that comes from divisional, right? You get better customer service that comes from divisional because you're now interacting more with the environment. Better performance accountability, again, divisional helps us with that. And the improved strategic management, that comes out because you are considering both the divisional and the functional simultaneously. So you're better able to coordinate your strategic efforts. But just like divisional and just like functional, you have problems. And one of the major problems that come about from matrix structures is this two-boss system. This two-boss system that is created because you have persons. Let me go back to that diagram. The yellow guy here, he's got two bosses. He's got a manufacturing manager that he answers to, and he's got a Project A manager that he answers to. Well, what's the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is that there's often power struggles between those bosses. Let's take, for example, this issue. Let's say yellow guy has been called by the Project a leader and been told that he needs him to work dedicated, he has to be dedicated to a part of the project that is required to be fulfilled in the next month. Okay, so I'm going to have to send you abroad because you need to work on it. Okay, goes back to his office. His manufacturing manager says, listen, we have a major problem with one of our suppliers. I need you to be going to this other part of the world and dealing with that problem right now. Okay, I'm one person. Yes, technology is there, so maybe I can Skype, but it's very difficult for me to be at two places at the same time. Whose goals do I fulfill? And that's one of the problems with the two boss system. It infringes upon this unity of command principle. And now I have to kind of listen to two bosses. I have to try to resolve any conflict, and that can be very problematic. So that's one of the major issues, and that also can lead many times to increased costs because you have now more leaders, more managers, and it can actually become too complex for the organization. So that, in a nutshell, is some of the types of organizational structures that create. Remember what an organization or what is organizing. Organizing is all about allocating resources and tasks and finding ways to coordinate those tasks and those resources together to fulfill the goals and the plans of the organization. Organizational structures are the result of that. They are the demonstration of relationships between and among people in organizations. They tell us, they demonstrate who does what, who reports to whom, and how those different tasks and groups are related and coordinated across the entire organization. Because organizational structures are created to fulfill specific plans, they can take on different shapes, they can take on different designs based upon the type of plan that the organization has chosen. And we looked at three general types of organizational structures. They were all based upon the concept of departmentalization, which is simply grouping people together. And we said we can group people together functionally because of their similarities across functions. We can group people divisionally based upon their similarities in terms of the products they created, the markets they served, or the customers they serve. Or we can try to combine the best of both worlds, try to get the efficiency from functional, try to get the flexibility from divisional through the matrix structure. So this, in a nutshell, it gives you an idea of the types of organizational structures. In our next brief lecture, I'm going to talk more about organizational design, which goes more specifically into linking organizational structures with the strategies and the plans of organizations.